Hello guys, and welcome to my part of the Fox Company collaboration build. So this was the last part of the collab, and in this video I will go some more into depth about my building progress and process. So this build took me about 3 months to build, on and off, and I have definitely faced some new challenges with this build. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start on the outside with the main gate and just the terrain. So this was probably the part of the MOC where I had to give the most thoughts into and be the most careful with, cause I'm not really used to building with terrain. I'm used to building square things, rooms, or stuff that has a definite shape to it. So I had to look to other builders for some inspiration and some techniques, but for my first time doing a large scale terrain build, I think it turned out pretty good. And another thing I really had to think about before I started building was how I wanted to do the floor terrain, or whatever you want to call it. And my first thought was just to do these regular slopes and just have it go slope down like that, or just wedge plates. But I wanted to try something new. So I saw some mini MOCs on Instagram and Flickr that use a lot of snot techniques for terrain. So I thought I'd give it a try, and the final product turned out pretty good. As you can see, I have 4 layers of bricks making up the terrain, and then just having some sloping going up over the main gate. And I also use some of these teeth pieces from place to place to give some extra detail. And if we go over to the left, we have a small door, which I think turned out pretty good. Another thing I also wanted to do with the terrain was to have some variation between just slopes on regular placed slopes and some slopes on hinges, as you can see here, and here, and a little bit here, which adds a little bit more variation to the terrain, which I also thought turned out really good. And on some places you might notice that the white bricks aren't in the best quality. They have a little bit of yellowing, and that's because most of my parts in my white collection are pretty old, and I didn't want to make a $100 order of new white parts, so that's why some parts may seem dirtier or older than others. But let's enter the base through the door, or the small door, not the main gate. And in here we can see one of those classic Hoth Echo Base hallways, which has some grills on them. And what I decided to do was do a variation in white grills and light gray grills, and also have some plates and jumpers to make it look like some snow has covered the grills. And on the wall we also have some tubes running, which we can also see a lot in Echo Base. Unfortunately I couldn't get them to run all the way to the entrance and to the entrance into the main hallway, or main place in the base, because I didn't have enough of these tubes. And a thing I wanted to do but couldn't was, you can see on some places on the base it might seem a little bit boring with just these straight bricks as walls, and I wanted to do some more variation, but the problem was I ran out of slopes, and the only white piece I had towards the end was bricks, and I didn't want to order anything, so this was what I had to deal with and build with. So let's move on to the next room, and I will review these rooms based on what level they are in. So right now we're on the first level. So in here we have the kind of cargo room of the Echo Base, with some storage units, boxes, and mechanical stuff hanging from the ceiling. So if I start taking these out, we just have a crate, and in there you can see some boxes and some containers which I used one of these wedge things to make it look like the boxes are placed kind of unorganized. And in here we have one of those kind of iconic big crates that we can see a lot on Echo Base, but also under the transports. So here we can have a look on all the details in the kind of cargo section of the base, where we have some bars running up, some just rock, since we know that the planet isn't 100% snow or ice, it has a bedrock under it. And then we have a kind of engine or engine part hanging from the ceiling, and some wedge plates and tiles and other kinds of parts making up the floor. And two last things I want to show before I move on to the next room is these big pillars supporting the roof over the room, which are made of some bricks for structural reasons, and then just some hinges on the sides to make these tilt a little bit. And then on the other side we have kind of an air vent output, or yeah. And then over here we have an openable door, which can be opened through a pretty simple method by just pulling these. And I decided not to do like one of these roll functions, because I didn't really have space for it, and I didn't have the right parts to do it as well. So if we move on to the next part, which isn't really a room, but I still want to show this. So I wanted to include lights in this MOC, but because of some technical problems with them, I could not get them to work. So that was a little bit of a bummer. But then I also have this kind of mobile section of the MOC, which can be easily removed like that. And I did this so that I could get some good camera shots through here into the MOC. And if I put this back on, we'll move on to the next section. Gotta make sure no light wires are in the way. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it like it is, and then I'll fix that later. So the next room is kind of I would say a technical room or another storage room with some storage units and a radar dish and some other stuff. And this room would have had some lights incorporated to it, but again, could not get that to work. And then we just have a hallway running out to the main section of the MOC. And then if we move on to the second level, we'll get into some more interesting stuff. And here we have a bedroom, or whatever you want to call it, for Hoth Echo Base, where the rebels can sleep and rest when not having to work or needing to be in combat. And I decided to use some of these cool light gray modified tiles, which I think turned out really great for the border of the bed. And then over here we also have a back to tank running, which I used some grill pieces, with some slope added to it to add a nice background. And then I also decided to, and this is where the wire runs for the lower lights, for the lower section. And I came up with this cool technique where you could just put the wires inside these black Technic pins, which adds for a nice detail of wires going over the floor. And then if we move on to the right, we get to one of the to the command section of this part of Echo Base with a ton of computers and different kind of systems and monitors running over this wall, and some dark red bars separating it from the lower floor, and again we have some black pins with a wire in it running over, and a kind of window looking over the main section of Echo Base. And now we'll move on into the main section of the base, which if you would scale yourself to a minifigure, you would have to enter through either that pathway or another pathway in over there. And this leads into the main section, which you can see has 2 levels to it. 2 small pathways going, one on the right and one on the left. And then we have the main floor down here with some light, or they are lights in the real Hoth Echo Base, but they're not functional lights in this MOC. And if we look into it through the main gate, we can see that there's some more into details on how I built these side second levels. And one thing I really thought I did well was with this curving over here. I think that turned out really good. And as you might notice, there are some rails here that would fit the gate into this hallway or main section. And I did construct a prototype for this, which I will show you now. And it looked like this. So what would happen was I would place it like that, and then I would push it in. I would push it in a little bit and it would turn. If I change the view here, you might see that I'm using these curved tiles over there. And the idea was that it would curve into the other rail and then make the whole gate turn. But that didn't work as well as I thought it would. So when I pushed this, it usually broke, which was a big problem. And my first thought was to buy this like 1x4 curved tiles, but again I didn't want to spend any more money, and I didn't really have any more money. And then we can just see the window looking over the main section again, with the doorway, one of the crates from the hover tank. Under there is the entrance from the hallway going out like there. And that is pretty much it for this main section. So if we move out, we can get a whole and big overview of the whole MOC, and I am pretty happy with the final result. Especially this, I think this looks really good. But again, I think I could have done it a lot better if I had the parts to do it a lot better. Because a lot of the reasons for things being a little bit ugly or built by bricks and not as much detail and not having as much details was because I ran out of parts pretty quickly. So I think for the next time I'm gonna do a build like this, I need to do some more planning, pre-planning, and just think, can I build this with the parts that I have without having to buy more parts? And yeah, that's probably gonna be it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys when I build my next MOC.